So when it comes to reviewing the Masters, the first thing that I always like to do is come to the bucket system portion of my spreadsheets and show you how well the bucket system did. The success column you see here has everything to do with this year's bucket system. I have 36 total buckets. We have last year, last week, course history, recent form, salaries, and strokes gained buckets. In this column, it will determine if it was a success based off of my projections and how many golfers finished either inside the top 10 or the optimal lineup. It's kind of a or statement. So if this number falls in between the projection, successful, that bucket's deemed successful. If it doesn't, so like this one here is 1 to 3, we can see it says 4, but in the optimal lineup there were 3, so therefore it was successful. And that's kind of how all of this is being portrayed on the screen. There are some things we have to consider, some things to talk about. So when I look at this recent form 6 bucket, which I'm going to talk about here because there's a lot of live golfers in this bucket. This projection says 0 to 1. Now, it is one of my rules that you always want a 2-point buffer. And since we can't go lower than 0, then we have to increase the max projection up to 2. When we do that, we still don't get the numbers either in the top 10 or in the optimal lineup. I then create a SweetSpot optimal, and we'll see how well that did versus the optimal and the GPP winning lineup, just to see if it would have taken any of those down. I do include that here. So you're going to see that. And the SweetSpot optimal that I'm going to provide follows the bucket projections to the T. So therefore, this 0 to 2, yeah, this one failed. However, the one down here with the strokes gained 5 buckets, this is technically 0 to 2. There were 2 all across the board. Top 10s, optimal lineups, and SweetSpot optimals, meaning 34 out of 36 buckets were successful. If you want to fact check me, pause the video and just look at the projections in these 2 columns. Minimums, remember, we always round down. Maximums, we always round up. So this would be 2 to 4 in this bucket. Again, if you want to fact check me, again, pause the video. But 34 to 36 is pretty standard place when it comes to the bucket system. I'd love to see 36 out of 36 correct, because that means I probably did well when it comes to building lineups. But 34 out of 36 is still pretty darn good as well. The biggest thing by far was this bucket here, the recent form 6s. This had everything to do with the live golfers. They were all in this bucket. They did play the week before down in Orlando during a live tour event. I don't include that in either recent form or even last week buckets, so they would all be in this last week 6 bucket as well. The projection was still pretty high. I was projecting anywhere between 5 to 9 golfers being inside the top 10. There were 13. 6 were in the optimal lineup, 6 were in the SweetSpot optimal. So you can only roster 6 golfers, and I was gonna say fair enough, but we could still roster 6 despite whatever golfer were in there, because you have to take into account salaries, price tags and stuff like that. Still worked out for that projection. Anyways, Live Tour was a big question mark, especially when it came to the buckets, because this recent form 6 bucket, it was 0 to 2, and one thing I didn't catch until after the tournament, I actually had this average per year around 30. I forgot to update some of the formulas that created this number, and it was just for this bucket, so I don't have to worry about any of the other buckets. I did go and check, like I double checked. Just oh man, it bothers me because seeing this number at 13.4, when I saw it, it was either like somewhere in the 20s or lower 30s. I was like, okay, well, I don't really have to consider this bucket to be something to really look at. Keep it at 0 to 2. Let the optimizer select some of the live golfers. That's fine. Maybe some of the other golfers that just, whatever. But really don't focus on trying to select a golfer from here. This 13 to 31, that's a huge difference. Now, The other thing that kind of stinks is the strength of field points isn't super high from this bucket because the OWGR has taken away points, or not so much taken away points, doesn't reward points for live golfers. So how my bucket system works is it takes every golfer in that bucket. So this recent Form 6 bucket, every single golfer, this includes your Freddie Couples, your Sandy Lyles, your Larry Mizes, the golfers that, I mean, Freddie had a decent Masters until the final round, which, sorry guys, it's something I could have predicted. Yeah, we're going to see Freddie at the top, but he's always going to falter because he's old. And he just can't, the longevity of a round, especially with Freddie's back, it's just never going to ever amount to anything spectacular. He's never going to be inside the top 10. So I'm never going to roster him. He's going to be in this bucket. Where was I going with that? So recent Form 6s, those are all the golfers that typically would be in this bucket. There's a very low 6. Okay, I remember what I was saying. You take all of those golfers, every single one, amateurs that haven't played a PGA Tour event in the last 7 weeks, senior tour golfers who also have not played a PGA Tour event in the last, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. You put all of those golfers in, or all of them, you pool them all together, and we figure out what is their percentage of finishing inside the top 10. It was 1.49%. Now, I have a safeguard against this. So yeah, 1.49, not super great. Like my projections use this number. They also use how many golfers are in that bucket. Well, even 31 times 1.59, not going to be a high projection. Just won't be. But I use the strength of field points to also try to boost up the projections. Like if it had a ton of good golfers in this bucket, this projection would get boosted up. But because it's Live Tour, it doesn't. And that's where the whole issue lied for me. Is the only reason this bucket isn't successful is because it's a Live Tour bucket, which is kind of frustrating because 3 golfers were in the optimal lineup from Live, and I would never have played more than 2, meaning I was never getting to the optimal lineup. I'm not blaming the bucket system. I'm not blaming myself, because it's an anomaly. Unfortunately, it's worth $1 million, if you play in the Millie Maker. And that's the thing that's kind of bothersome because nothing is going, like, you can't really incorporate anything that goes with Live Tour with this event. So this is kind of a new year of data recording, recording the data for this year. We're going to know what this is going to be like for the years to come. So, hey, the Live Tour still has golfers on it that are pretty good at golf. They can come here and perform against the PGA Tour. It sucks. It sucks I didn't have the foresight to kind of think about this. I mean, Brooks, let's go ahead and look at the optimal versus the GPP. Brooks was in the optimal lineup. He was also in the Millie Maker lineup. He was in every, he was not in the Sweet Spot optimal, but he was in basically every optimal lineup or GPP winning lineup that you could possibly have. That's cool. There's definitely a one-off that we can add Brooks to, but are we also then adding Phil Mickelson to that mix? That's now 2 live golfers. He's in the optimal, he's in the Sweet Spot optimal, and he's in the second Sweet Spot optimal. He's not in the Millie Maker lineup, but he is in all of the optimal lineups that I have, and I'll explain what these are. That's 2. Surely we can't have more than 2 live golfers in there. Yeah, no, we can, because it's Patrick Reed. So 3 live golfers inside the top 4. I have nothing against Live Tour. I have nothing against the, performance. It was a big what if. And it was a what if that I used my bucket system to the exact T. 0 to 2. That's as much, that's all I'm grabbing from Live. Is 2 golfers at most. And other really crappy thing about this is if I were to go back, if I were to go and check this out, Brooks, Phil, and Patrick Reed are outside the top 50 of my model. because my model brings in a ton of stats from the PGA Tour. So that's just another thing that I kind of have to complain about. Again, you need the foresight in order to see that, or just, you know, if you were going to include 2 golfers from Live Tour or even 3 golfers from Live Tour, it was probably based off of an agenda, not so much an agenda. Can't think of the word I'm looking for, but it was a conscious thought that you're like, I'm going to play 3 Live golfers no matter what. And then that's how you get there, because there's no modeling outside of course history, by the way. Each 3 of these golfers, look at this. 34 was Brooks' average finishing position. Same with Phil, and Patrick Reed was very close behind it. So we could use the course history angle. Probably should have. We should have weighed course history way more, and that's how we get some of these Live golfers up, especially the ones that did well. So I don't know. I don't want to beat myself up over it, but it is one of those things that, you know, if I or any of you are investing your money into selecting the right golfers, I pride myself on figuring out who the top 10 golfers are going to be, or at least their stat profiles that are going to be inside the top 10. I just don't, I couldn't get there this week. Like, we were really close to seeing like Jordan Spieth be up there inside the top 10, or not top 10, second place. Like, Phil and Jordan actually switched spots on the last hole. I think Jordan bogeyed it, and then Phil birdied it, or Jordan parred it and Phil. I think Jordan bogeyed it actually. So I think it was like a 2-shot swing, and so they flipped positions basically. Trying to think, when it comes to the Masters, it was wonderful to watch. The weather delays kind of sucked. That wasn't super great. Rahm was one of those golfers. I told you I was going to go 30-30-30, like 30% on each 10K golfer. I think I got to 24% on Jon Rahm. I put a little bit extra into Rory McIlroy, who ended up missing the cut. So just how it goes sometimes. But I think the most surprising thing to me, because I obviously I'm here talking about the optimal lineup. I'm trying to hit the optimal lineup. The most surprising thing to me is having 3 Live golfers in the optimal lineup. I really don't necessarily care how many were inside the top 5, inside the top 10. It's all about the optimal lineup. So that's crazy. Crazy. A good story was Sam Bennett, $6,200 amateur. Told you not to play him because there really has never been an amateur to finish inside the top 10 over the last 10 years. So why start now? I mean, like, it's funny, like, no one actually reached out to me to say, well, I think this is the year it's going to happen, but you could have. After 3 rounds, he was 4th place. Well, 2.5, he was 4th place. So yeah, interesting. Your optimal lineup, by the way, just to go over those golfers. It left $1,200 on the table, and it's all these little black tick marks. It says top 6 golfers: Rahm, Koepka, Mickelson, Spieth, Reed, and Henley. So that's a 10K golfer, a 9K golfer, 7, 7, 7, 6. Again, you left $1,200 on the table, which probably impossible to do. I mean, I wouldn't again, never advocate for it. Your Millie Maker winning lineup used, they're these golfers in blue. $10,800 Jon Rahm, $7,600 Brooks Koepka, $7,300 Patrick Reed, 2 8K golfers in Cam Young and Victor Hovland, and another 7K golfer in Chris Kirk. So just to recap, there are no 6K golfers in there. You start with a 10, you drop to 2 8s, and then you have 3 7s. A pretty balanced build, for being honest. You have arguably the best golfer in the world. Well, he is now the best golfer in the world, but heading into that, you can make the argument that he was the best golfer in the world for the last, couple months. And then you add a bunch of 7K golfers and 2 young 8K golfers in Cam Young and Victor Hovland, which I think were great plays. I'll talk about Victor Hovland here in the Marquee Tee Times, but that was pretty great. Now I have 2 SweetSpot optimals. So the SweetSpot optimal follows the bucket system completely. Your optimal lineup scored 577.5 points. Your Millie Maker lineup scored 542 points. Now, there's a That's a good enough gap for the Sweet Spot Optimal to slide in. Unfortunately, if you were to follow the exact lineup using all the bucket conditionals, you scored 507. That is 35 points behind the Millie Maker lineup. And when I looked to see what place I would have gotten, I would have made $600. I think I got 200. It would have been like 250th place or something like that. Wherever the $600 threshold was, that's how much I would have made. Which, don't get me wrong, would have been a profit for me this week because I didn't put a lot of money in the Millie Maker. But, oof, not great. So I use the optimizer following all the bucket conditionals, and that gets me 507. So that's Rahm, Mickelson, Reed, Cantlay, Sung J M, and Shane Lowry. Again, had I known that the recent form bucket was going to be so different. So, again, what I'm talking about is this recent form bucket that I have highlighted. We had 31 golfers in that bucket this week, or at the Masters. 15 of them were live golfers. You take 15 out, you'd have 16 golfers in that bucket. And guess what? That gets you down to a number very similar to the average. But because we had more, the projection was 0 to 2. And we knew there were no OWGR points to be had for live golfers. You know, that's been something they've been losing out on every single week. So this bucket was not properly, updated. If I was just to use a rational brain with this and just think about it, well, first of all, had I updated the formulas properly to begin with, I would have seen that disparity. And I think that would help me understand to bump this number up to 3. I would never go more than 3. Like I sat down and I thought about this. I would never go over 3. There would be an argument to have to say this should be to 4, but I could never get myself to get up to 4. Just would not work. I also had another issue. What was it? I think it was this course history 1 bucket. No, recent form 1 bucket. I rewatched my I think strategy video or preview video, and I came back and I saw this and I was like, wait a minute, what? I think it was which one was it? Recent form 1? I was building lineups. Yeah, it was strategy video. I was building lineups for someone, and it said it was for Chad Eckert. Okay, Chad, if you're listening to this is what it was. We're trying to build you a Rory McIlroy, Jordan Spieth, Sung J M lineup, I think, and neither one of those golfers were in this bucket, and we could not build a lineup because I had this set to 1 to 2. I have this set up as 1 to 2. The rules are you want a 2-point gap, 2-point buffer, maximum's 1.94. Even if I look at my conservative number over here, I always like to look at this just to see if maybe I should, pull to one side or the other. Like, should I go over 2 or should I just keep it at 2? It doesn't go over 2. So 1.98, 1.94, those both go to 2, meaning the minimum needs to go to 0, has to go to 0. I was so bullish that there was going to be one golfer from this bucket to be inside the top 10 that I kept it at 1. These 2 updates, 0 to 3, 0 to 2, and I rerun this. I get a lineup that scores not enough points. Okay, I'm sorry. What was... there has to be something that was not updated properly. I had this set up already. Is it course history 1? Let me just double check this. No, 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 1 to 3. Yeah. It scored 577 points. So it was a half point behind. I don't remember how to get there. Okay, well, I'm not going to sit here in silence and not remember what it was. This one scores 533. That still doesn't take down a GPP, but it gets really close. here. Let me actually save these over here. Let me rerun it to see. No, I shouldn't do it that way. Recent form 2s, recent form 1s. Is that correct? 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 1 to 3. Yeah, that's correct. I don't remember which one it is. Do I keep these to 0, I wonder? I don't think that's what it is, though. Darn it. I'm sorry. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. I guess what like I said, I could do is just do this. Try to figure out where it was that I saw it. It made sense. Once I saw the lineup built, I'm like, okay, so here it is. 577.5. So which one was it? Last year ones. Okay, that's interesting. I don't think I would personally not select 2 last year ones. That'd be difficult, but that was something to look at. So last year ones, there were technically 3 golfers from this bucket inside the top 10, but none of them were in the optimal lineup or even in the sweet spot optimal. And just to show you who those golfers were, they're the golfers that had a top 10 finish or a top 20 finish the year before. So that was Scotty, Matty Fitzpatrick, and Colin Morikawa. Those guys did finish 10th. Now, Scotty, had he been able to putt, probably would have had himself a top 5 finish or at least challenging the lead, but obviously that didn't happen. Can't play the what if game. There were no golfers inside the top 9 that had top 20 the event the year before. That is extremely uncommon. Extremely uncommon. That was the bucket that really did us in. Not having, I mean, the projection was 2 to 4. And I would not change this at all. I would definitely want to select 2 golfers no matter what from this bucket. So it's unfortunate. Let me see you know what? I could have probably saved your time. I put a note in here without bucket system minimums. Okay. Yeah, $50,000 you could use. That's what got this other lineup. Although this one says 571. It's because I increased the recent form 6. I'm all over the place for you guys. If you're following along, wonderful. If not, I apologize. But yeah, you use up all $50,000, and it was Rahm, Brooks, Phil, Spieth, Henley, and Victor Hovland. You would have done the 10, 9, 8. Not Cam Young. Victor Hovland 8, 7, 7, 6 method. And that would have scored 571.5 points, which was 6 points underneath the optimal and 30 points above the milli maker. So taking the minimums out, that would have helped. Maybe that's what I try to do going forward. But for this event, especially if LIV continues to be a thing and the golfers that are in LIV continue to play the Masters, especially Brooks, especially DJ, all the golfers that have done well here in the past, we'll always have to keep that in mind. So don't want to beat myself up too much about that. It's just something that's really interesting. One thing I'm happy about, though, is when we talk about the Marquee Tee Times for the Masters, if you're unaware with this, I just group rank the top 10 golfers or the top 10 groups that were paired together at the Masters Thursday, Friday, and we create rules. You want to select 2 to 4 of those groups, and within each of those groups, select 1 golfer, and that's it. Don't select 2 golfers. We don't want 2 golfers from the same group to be in our lineups. So one thing that worked out was Rahm and Spieth. You created Rahm Spieth lineups. You followed the Marquee Tee Time rules. Again, 2 to 4 groups, 1 golfer from each of those groups. And so far, we select 2. We get Rahm, we get Spieth. That works out perfectly. Now, the GPP winning lineup used Rahm and Cam Young, who were paired together. So you can win a GPP that way. But yeah, to get that second sweet spot optimal, Rahm, Spieth, Victor Hovland. All three of those golfers were in the Marquee Tee Times. Again, 2 to 4 is what you're looking for. So if you started a John Rahm, Jordan Spieth, Victor Hovland lineup, you're probably sitting pretty. Like, it looked good. And then if we scroll down, we're probably not going to see any of the other optimal lineup golfers together, and we don't. Henley was in a different group than Brooks. So it all works out. The Marquee Tee Times were 100% successful. The bucket system was about 94% successful. Whatever 34 by 36 is, that is your success rate there. SweetSpot Optimal would not have taken down the GPP, but that second alternate one where we take the minimums out could have. We're not doing that, so I'm not chalking that up as a victory whatsoever. But yeah, that is going to cover a review of the Masters. Now, I didn't really talk about the golfers in it. I just talked about the SweetSpot process because that is the only thing that really matters to me. So it was a great tournament regardless. I love the Masters. Everyone I made pimento cheese sandwich. I was all about it. So that concludes the Masters, the review of the Masters.